BYU football back to the 80s. Love this era's conversation that we've been having, and why not welcome in the legend and NFL MVP, two-time Super Bowl champion, the great Steve Young, is with us on this BYUSN special. Steve, how are you today?
No, you guys are trying to pump me up. Usually I come on here and you try to rip me to pieces. So this is going to be fun. Let's see how great you can make me look. That's awesome.
This is your home, Steve. Well, with that said, we do want to talk about 1982, which is really funny because people act like this is just this glossed over year. You guys still were 7-1 and WAC champs, but it felt like 82 is this sort of afterthought. What was it like going into that season being like, all right, the great Jim McMahon's done. This left-handed guy who was the 8th-string quarterback is going to be our quarterback now. You guys win the WAC. You still had a good year.
Yeah, and I remember that moment and felt like, because everything was around winning the WAC and going to the Holiday Bowl. And that was that's how you judged yourself. And then, try to go win the Heisman. That was what Jim, I guess it started back with it goes way back. But Jim McMahon, when I joined in 80, the 80 team was nutty. Like they were beating people 70-2, and Jim was throwing the ball thousands and thousands of yards, and the rest of college football still running the split T or the veer or we were so far ahead of everybody else, and we were just abusing the system because we were so far ahead of it. And it felt very familiar when I got to the 49ers with the West Coast offense and what they were doing in abusing the league because they were so far ahead as well. So there's real resonance between what we were doing in the late 70s and 80s and maybe somehow how it informed Bill Walsh. I never asked Bill that. Bill really helped when he brought Mike Holmgren back from BYU. I know, Mike had a lot to say about that. And I think Bill probably took some things from what BYU was doing to inform. But those were two experiences that felt very familiar because we were, you had to be there when they'd warm up and know they were doing, and look, talent-wise, when we came out of the locker room, it wasn't like everyone goes, oh my gosh, watch out for Matt Braga, he's gonna get you. There wasn't anything that, and I'm picking on Matt, but I'm just saying that, but we just the execution and the innovation and the explosiveness. And the other thing about Jim McMahon, because if we're going to talk about the 80s, he's the start of it. He technically was the most sound quarterback that I ever been around and maybe ever was. I mean, Joe was obviously very technically sound, and how they played the position, how they read it, the defense, how they deliver the football. I mean, he was for all of his craziness, he was technically right down the middle, man. He was amazing, and he was throwing the ball. And I don't know if there was anyone that threw the ball like he did as early as he did in the pros or college. In the pros they weren't throwing. There's no way they were throwing the ball. Joe was doing it a few years later in '84 in the Super Bowl and against Miami. But by '80, I don't know if there's anybody. I think maybe you can say Dan Fouts a little bit, right, and the Air Coryell, but. In college, nobody, you could maybe say that Stanford was doing with John, but there was no one like this. And so that's why when you talk about the 80s, you got to set the context is that BYU is doing something that was revolutionary in many ways and was just pounding people because of it. And it was super fun to be around. Every game was amazing. But you go back to 82, you want to talk about 82. Yeah, it was a good year. We won the WAC, but we didn't win the Super Bowl. We didn't win the Holiday Bowl, and Ohio State came in and freaking smashed us, and smashed me, man. It was brutal, and that's who we were though. Throughout that time, a huge national powerhouse with the size and athletic ability and the speed could beat us. But they beat us with just pure velocity, like it just ran us over. And it was a lesson for the future, so that we could kind of amend what we had done before. And SMU did the same thing. SMU ran us over in 80, but then the last 4 or 5 minutes was insanity. We know that story.
Steve Young is with us on BYU Sports Nation. This is BYU Football back to the 80s. I want to stay with one more 1982 question, specifically about the renovation and the expansion of Lavell Edwards Stadium. Cougar football fans saw this greatness building from the 70s and through Jim McMahon, and now you're the starting quarterback. What do you remember about playing in front of that expanded Lavell Edwards Stadium for the first time?
That was fun because it felt like a true 360 stadium, like it could fit, people that it felt like it really mattered. I mean, when you have two sides and you don't have any in the end, that was, I think Wyoming had that. There was other teams of New Mexico had that. It was like, it just felt like more high school, and the expansion made us feel like, kind of major league. And that was important. I think that sometimes the facilities matter, coaches matter, offensive style, like it all matters. And so when we built out the stadium, it felt like we could, when we brought people into town, every once in a while Texas A&M would show up, or every once in a while someone else. It was like, no, we can think of ourselves as more big time now. Now looking back, I wish we would have done an even bigger job, right? I mean, I wish we would have kind of been more aspirational about it, because I think it would be fun if it was bigger today, but hey, we'll take it.
Okay, at Georgia in 1982, this is a game that BYU nearly pulls off, 17-14. Tom Holmoe had a pick six in that game. That was a big moment. Freshman Herschel Walker, junior Steve Young. This is a big game. How close was BYU to winning that game, which would have been the biggest win in program history at the time?
We had the game. It was done. It was fourth. I remember Herschel and the quarterback was Buck Ballou, and it was pouring rain the whole day. And I have my own terrible story about that game with Lavell and my 5 or 6 interceptions. It was a disaster. But we were still in it, and we actually had the lead late. And I want to say it was fourth and maybe a yard for the Georgia going in for the winning score. And the ball literally gets snapped and spits through Buck Ballou's hands straight in the air, right? It's 4th and 1, the ball's straight in the air, and everyone's waiting for it to come down, and it comes down to this big pile of people. And I'll never forget, the head referee comes out of the pile. Herschel Walker has the ball, and they spot it, half a yard, like they gained 1.5 yards by snapping the ball straight up in the air. First down, Georgia. And I just remember like, oh my gosh, I'll never let that, even when I say that, I throw up in my mouth, because, like, first down, Georgia. Like, gain 1.5 yards on a ball spinning up in the air between the, but that was the game. For all of my foibles and all the mess that it was in that pouring rain, that was the game. And if they don't gain that 1.5 yards from first down Georgia, it was our game, which would have been super fun, because I never played worse, and it would have been so much fun to win a game that I played so terrible.
Certainly,
like, that'd be especially at Georgia,
Now, through all the hard times that you've been discussing through 82 and some frustrations, it set up a magical 1983. What was different about 1983, and how did you build from some of those tough experiences in 82 that shaped the great season that 83 was?
I was better. I played 82 trying to replace Jim McMahon, trying to, just fraught with terror, and I remember when we played at Utah in 82 to win the WAC, and it started snowing at the end of the game. And I remember walking off the field thinking, at least I did that. At least I'm there. Like I did. And I didn't mean it was me individually. I get the fact that we're all a team game. You guys know it. I know that intuitively. But just the sense that how the perception is, and just there was a relief. And I think that was a building block to 83. 83 felt like it was my year. And that maybe I matured, maybe I looked at it differently, maybe I had a different perspective, but I know that it felt way different to me. And it felt like something I could go author. And that's my own maturity. It's my immaturity in 82 that I think cost us, and I think my maturity in 83 really helped.
Steve, I've been a proponent that 83 needs to get more respect and is right up there with the greatest team in BYU football history. And you look at what you did on the resume. I can't find another BYU team that finished the season with 2 road wins against teams that finished in the top 20. But you did that at UCLA and at Air Force. Certainly your maturity plays into that. But what did going through that and having that type of resume do for you as you pursued your own football career after, pulling off an incredible season where you finished number 7 in the country?
Yeah, I think again, building off 82 and the experience with Ohio State, and it's kind of like you have to see it to truly understand it. And when Ohio State came out, and Ohio State had a really good team, but had lost the game. Maybe Michigan beat them or something, and they were flaming about it, and they came out, and so I think that the experience at the Holiday Bowl in 82 really informed all of us on what it really meant to be good or to be great, and certainly informed me a lot. And I think 83 was about that. It was like, look, we want to be great. We don't want to just be WAC champions. We want to be great. And I think that's why the game at UCLA was the game that gave us the chance to prove it in the Rose Bowl. And I think that was a one that, maybe led ways for in the future because in the next few years we had to go play some big games. And I think off of what happened, there's an inspiration that came off of SMU, like it was, that, but everyone recognized as kind of just crazy once in a lifetime. And then it really became what happened at UCLA. And I think UCLA was, especially being on the West Coast, especially in the Pac-12, at the time it was Pac-10 probably, and and just being in the Rose Bowl and all that stuff. So 83 really was defined by that game, and that game was defined by what happened the year before at Ohio State and how much we learned. And it was a difficult lesson, but we weren't going to be, and we were about that. I remember everyone on our team, everybody felt like we had all the talent in the world to go up against anybody. And that's where we talk about national championship. In 83, we're like, we're going to go win it. And obviously, the thing at Baylor was something that you talk about throwing up in your mouth. Because being undefeated that season, we could have been national champions, right? But Baylor was the one that opening day down in Baylor, another lesson. But by the end of the season, we were really good. And we've been built off. Sorry about that. Oh my gosh, look at that. The great Lee Johnson.
Of course, Lee would be calling you.
Lee interrupting.
Come on, man. You got to be kidding me. But I think that's the story of that. And 83, put us up against anybody. I think all that 83 team would put us up against anybody for sure.
Did you think you had a shot at winning the Heisman? You finished second, which was the greatest in BYU history up to that point, and then it's still the second best finish ever.
Yeah. Mike Rozier in Nebraska, they just every week, when he was running for 250 yards every week. And not that we tried as a team to go win the Heisman together, because you have to do something spectacular every week to do that. But we were good enough as a team to kind of just organically compete for that. And when I say the Heisman is won by a team, it really is. I mean, especially a quarterback. I mean, the quarterback's got to throw it around, but everyone's got to do all this great stuff to get it done. That's what makes football so great. And I think that everybody on the team felt like we could go win the Heisman. I remember when they announced Mike Rozier won the Heisman and I was second, and they gave him the trophy and they handed me a sweatsuit. And big old thick cotton 1920 sweatsuit with a little tiny Heisman on it. I remember second sucks, man.
Do you still have that?
I don't know. If I do, it's at the bottom of the pile. I can tell you that.
That is amazing. Steve Young is on BYU Sports Nation. We're going to cover 1983 in a separate, 84, I should say, in a separate show. But when you beat Missouri and you win 11 straight games and you finish number 7, and it's just this remarkable send-off for you, at any point in your mind did you think, man, we've set up 84 to do something special? Like, did you fathom that 84 could potentially be in an even better scenario than you were in '83?
Well, it's hard to know because the quarterback transitions are always the thing that have defined BYU. When we've transitioned well, we've been really good. And when we haven't transitioned well, we're not very good. And so when Robbie took over, I didn't know anyone that thought that Robbie couldn't do it. But I mean, obviously going to look, anyone talking about a national championship at BYU had to be super aspirational. The fact that we were talking about it, the fact that Jim talked about it, like we were super aspirational about it. And think about the Heisman. You'd be super aspirational about the Heisman, just because of, again, hearts and minds, right? It's like you have to win people over. And so the idea that we are talking about it, absolutely, that's how you get there. But actually pulling it off, actually getting it done, super cool.
So you show up at BYU in 1980. Is the 80-81 athletic year the greatest in BYU sports history? Because you have the 1980 football team, which only loses one game, and you top it off with the greatest comeback in NCAA history. In the spring in '81, Danny Ainge and Greg Kite and Fred Roberts go to the Elite Eight, and then the men's golf team wins the national championship. Can that year be topped? That was pretty good.
It was my freshman year, and Floyd Johnson was the equipment manager. He'd been there since Brigham Young, I think. and I went to him and said, "Look, I want to watch the basketball team. You know, what can I do to help you so I could go up and watch?" He says, I need a visiting club manager to take the towels into the visiting locker room. And I said, that's me. So that whole basketball season, if you can go back and watch the video, I'm sitting at the end of the visiting bench with towels and handing them out to the visiting team, you know, and I watched Danny Ainge and Greg Kite and Scott Runya and Fred Roberts. I mean, my gosh, that was just, I was thrilled just as a young kind of aspirational athlete to watch the greatness of that team and who they were. Obviously, I watched all of what Jim had done. So yeah, how could you beat that? I don't know how we beat that year.
Steve, always great to talk with you. And certainly we knew we needed to have you on BYU Football back to the 80s because you were such a prominent player with a ton of touchdown passes and a ton of wins in those years.
Yeah, and also, don't forget, I was the color guy with Jim Nance.
Yes!
In 1984 for the national I feel like I'm somewhat responsible for the 84 team.
Yeah.
Because I kind of talked my way through it because I was in the USFL and the fall was off. And you know the old Jim Nance story where we got stuck in the elevator.
Yeah, crazy.
Yep.
That's wild. Well, we're glad that you were there to hold down the fort.
Colorado State, there's no announcer. It's just the game for the first. Jim Nance and I are stuck in the elevator. The brand new expanded stadium. The elevator quit on us.
We're glad that we got that thing fixed. Good grief. Hey, Steve, again, thanks for your time. We know how busy you are.
It's fun to go through memory lane. It's a lot of good times.
Absolutely.
And now it's time. Now look today. We got to recruit. Come on, Kalani, let's recruit. We got to get some people. Big 12, let's do this.
Let's go. Steve, thanks for the time, man.